Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen, welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this little cookbook that I really like. It was sent in by a viewer, thank you. It's got a lot of very interesting recipes in it that I want to try. Don't know if they're any good or not, that's why I want to try them. So this was published in 1898 in a town in England that I'm not going to say out loud. And the recipe we're going to do today is called honeycomb pudding. Now it starts out and it tells me to use a ½ ounce of gelatin. And I've got a sachet here of Knox's gelatin. I'm not sure if it's asking for sheet gelatin or powdered gelatin, but in 1898, powdered gelatin was definitely out there and used and called for. There were several different brands, and most of those brands are still around today, like Knox's. There's another one that was pretty prevalent throughout what would now be called the Commonwealth, and that was Cox's gelatin. So I don't know which one they're asking for. I'm going to use the powdered gelatin. It tells me to soak the gelatin in milk for 2 hours, which leads me to believe that it is the sheet gelatin. It's just not as easy to get. I know that you can get it, but the powdered gelatin is something that I always have in my kitchen. So I'm going to give that a try. I'm just going to mix that in. Going to let it sit for a couple of hours here on the countertop, and as I walk by every once in a while, I'll give it a stir and see what happens. Now, a couple hours have gone by, and I don't know that with the powdered gelatin 2 hours is necessarily necessary. So the next instructions are to add the egg yolks to the milk, add the sugar to the milk, and put it into a pot over the fire. So I'm going to start out just by putting it into a pot over my electric fire. I'm going to add the sugar. Now the recipe calls for loaf sugar. And I think this is kind of interesting because in this cookbook, you start to see this transition period in 1898 of the way sugar is sold, the way that it's presented and sold. And some people would still be buying sugar loaves, which were like cones of solid white sugar that you had to break off the sugar that you wanted to use. And new in the marketplace was sugar that was granulated, pretty much the way that we would buy sugar today. And so in the recipes, you can see some ask for sugar, some ask for loaf sugar, and some ask for caster and or granulated sugar. So I'm going to separate the eggs. I have this really cool copper bowl because I need to whip the egg whites in a later step. So whites into the copper bowl and yolks into the pot. Now give that a bit of a whisk to break up the yolks and bring it all together. The recipe asks to heat this until it starts to thicken, but don't let it boil. So I've chosen my temperature very carefully. I'm going to keep an eye on it pretty closely. Now I'm going to whip up the egg whites. You don't need a copper bowl, but since I've got this copper bowl now, I'm really loving it. So I'll whisk the egg whites. Now the copper bowl isn't magic, but it is pretty magical. It helps to stabilize the froth of the whites. There's a chemical reaction between the copper and the proteins in the egg whites that leads to just the most amazing foam. Okay, those egg whites are looking great. Great foam. Now I'm going to set that aside for a moment. This is just starting to thicken and sort of imperceptibly thicken, like it's not thick, but it's starting to thicken. So I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. That's something that you could probably do in a double boiler or a bain-marie type setup with a bowl over top of a pot of bubbling water. It would be a little bit easier if you're a little less confident in the kitchen. If you are confident in the kitchen, doing it in a pot like that and just keeping an eye on it out of the corner of your eye is great. It'll work just fine. Now, I'm supposed to use the juice of 1 lemon, so I'm going to juice a lemon here. Get all of that juice. And I'm going to whisk that in to what is essentially a custard. And it'll start to curdle it right away, as expected, but it'll be just fine. Now, I'm supposed to mix the egg whites into this. So I'm going to pull it off the heat. Doesn't tell me whether I should or not, but I'm thinking best practice, probably pull it off the heat at this point. And I'm not supposed to stir these in gently. It says mix well. So I'm going to use a whisk and just lightly whisk them in. Okay. Now I'll put in the last of the egg whites. And I'll use a spatula from this point just to stir them in. Now I'm supposed to pour this into a mold, into a wet mold. And I'm thinking of all the things that I could put this into that would look really nice when I pull it out at the table. And I don't have anything that will take this much pudding. So I'm just going to use a big glass bowl. I'm just going to mix this just a little bit more, see if I can get those egg whites mixed in. And for everyone who is concerned about the egg whites not being cooked, that really shouldn't be much of a concern. There's enough carryover heat from the milk and egg yolk mixture that the egg whites will cook really quickly as soon as you put them in. And the acid from the lemon will take care of the rest. So I'm going to use this as my mold. It's not really much of a mold. And in goes the pudding. Now it just says to pour it into the mold to set. I'm going to take advantage of my newfangled electric refrigerator and put this in for a couple of hours, let it chill down and set completely.
Hey, Glenn, what you doing in the fridge?
Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends.
So, honeycomb pudding.
Honeycomb pudding.
Now,
Oh, hey, look, I brought one for friends.
this is 24 hours after you saw me put it in the fridge. It took an awfully long time to set up.
It's very...
Okay, and it broke.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit weird. There you go. So
There's a weird layer in the bottom.
there's a layer on the bottom where it looks like the gelatin separated
Right,
from
so
the
this-
from the milk and the egg. Weird. So my worry when I was making it was that it doesn't say in the instructions whether you're supposed to fold the egg whites in while the milk mixture is hot or if you should let it cool a little bit. I'm now thinking that I should have let it cool a little bit.
Hindsight says.
Well, and it's one of those things where they don't
not
put
clear.
it. It's not clear. They don't put it in the recipe, and 120 years ago it may have been obvious.
So here's the irony, though. I know we haven't tasted it yet, but the gelatin, in theory, it's a bit like when you add gelatin to icing or something.
Stabilizes it.
Makes it more stable. It doesn't necessarily add or take away.
That's really nice.
So it's a very lemony, light.
It's light.
It's not quite. It's
like
not
eating
quite a custard.
It's like eating a lemon cloud.
It is a bit like eating a lemon cloud. So I wonder if that cloudiness would be slightly different if the gelatin had set. I'm gonna.
Okay. So I was going to say at the beginning, when I first dished it out and saw the way it separated, total fail. I'm at maybe 2% fail.
I'm at the. If you scraped it off, you could serve it, and no one would know any different.
Yeah. I would leave the bottom separated layer in there and just kind of say.
What I find funny is that the bottom separated layer is
Is it
it's
lemon?
like a lemon jello.
Okay.
Could use a little bit more lemon. It's like a lightly lemon jello. just who knows, eh?
2 desserts in one.
It's an odd little. Yeah, it's not quite right, but you could get away with it.
It's almost like a lemon meringue pie in a bowl out of the fridge.
remember the version of lemon meringue pie we made that was not, it was all whipped up? What was
Yes, that was
that?
really
That was a
good.
long time ago.
I'm going to link to that. That is my favorite island lemon pie.
That's what it's called.
Island lemon pie in the corner or down below in the description
We
box
don't
with
make
the
that
recipe.
enough. So if all else fails, this reminds us how much we love that
Yes.
recipe.
This is great. This is absolutely great. Not perfect. A little bit of tweaking, I think, in the method would get
How
this
we
right.
interpret it.
But this is absolutely fantastic. I'm blown away by this. I love this. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you again soon.